This is AJ Wachtel. Welcome to my podcast, Wachtelligence, where I discuss with my guests the past, present, and future of the local and national music scene with a focus on Boston and New England. Today's episode, the Cowsills, another side of the family band, is about the 7 siblings in the household that initially inspired the 70s television show, The Partridge Family, and the ones still making music today. You remember their hits, The Rain, The Park, and Other Things, We Can Fly, Indian Lake, and Hair, and they're singing the soundtrack for Love American Style, the TV show's first season in 1969. I can't wait to hear them talk about their new release, Rhythm of the World. Welcome to Wachtelligence, Bob and Paul.
Hey, AJ.
Hey, AJ. Hey, you got to make up a word. How cool.
Hey, listen, I'm just real glad that I was able to get you guys because, you know, you're on the other side of the coast. Bob, you're in Los Angeles, and Paul, you're on a farm, your family farm in Oregon, correct?
That's right. We live in Central Oregon.
We were taught that the world is a very small place. And I could be having lunch on Bannister's Wharf in Newport, Rhode Island by 6 this evening if I felt like it. So it's very close. Everything's there.
All right, listen, let's talk a little bit about your history. I know you guys are from Newport, Rhode Island. Dad was a Navy guy, and Newport is a Navy town. And you formed in 1965. That's 56 years ago. And that was Billy, Bob, and Barry. Bob, tell me a little bit about how you guys started playing together.
Look, the next time you read something like that, when you get to that was 56 years ago, you go, oh, that was 56 years ago. All right, anyway. No, listen, it started way before that. Me and Bill were playing guitar at age 7 and 8. By the time we were 12 and 13, we were playing gigs for like the Newport Women's Guild luncheon for $10 each. After that, it just launched us into folk music, hootenannies. We got into the whole scene. We went on the Middletown High School had them. Rogers High had hootenannies. Everyone had hootenannies. Long nights with long songs. We got Barry to be a drummer. We realized as young boys, hey, I think we need a drummer. Why? I don't know. We see drums. Let's get some. So we got drums. We got Barry. Now we don't know what a bass is. We think we sound good with 2 guitars and a drum. And we go out and perform with 2 guitars and a drum. No one asks, hey, where's your bass? Look, we were very young. Like Barry was 8. So when the Beatles came out, that stopped the show. That said, okay, put the bushwhacks away. Here's how you look. Here's what the gear you buy. Here's the songs you can play to get work with. And we learned their songs. We bought their gear. We got Ludwig drums, Box amps, and Gretsch guitars, and kept adding brothers to the band to get a better and bigger sound. We get signed to 2 labels and we get dropped. We're in high school and grade school. We're signed and dropped from 2 labels, had 3 or 4 releases that tanked. So credibility's real shot. At the time it's at its lowest, though, they sit us down and decide that the remedy to all the shot credibility is your mother's going to join your rock band. So now it's like we went from the lowest you could go to, oh, who knew there was lower? And so we went there. And of course, as fate would have it and the universe rules, as we know, we had our first million seller with Mom in the band. And the whole thing just got bigger and better. By the time it's on top, we got Paul and Susan and Mom and me and Barry and Bill and John. Everyone's in except our twin brother, who can have his own documentary is what that's all about.
We'll talk about Richard in a few.
Yeah, that's its own story. So that's basically it. You know, we got 3 yeses to make it. 3 yeses.
Well, you know, John played drums. He started learning how to play drums, and Barry moved to bass. And
hey, AJ.
Yeah.
AJ, I have to interject. John wasn't learning to play drums, dude. He came right out of the box playing drums. I don't think he really ever learned. He just knew.
You know, he said he would pass our little studio room at the house and look in, and it was the drum set that got his attention. That looked like the cool part to play.
You know, I remember once that Barry and I were standing, I think it was year 2000, when all the brothers played at the Taste of Rhode Island Festival, and we were at soundcheck, and me and Barry were standing listening to John play, and he is such a great drummer. And for all you that don't know, he's been with the Beach Boys as a keyboardist, vocalist, and drummer for the past 20 years or so. And he's just killer. But you know, let's talk. You know, while you guys were getting famous, Richard, he was in Vietnam, right?
Yeah. Yep. He did two shifts.
Yeah, and he didn't get drafted. He
No.
enlisted. But that's a deep story. You know, by the time he enlisted, he's really escaping New York and Dad and all the negativity that followed him from a little kid.
He was
with
your
his
twin
father.
brother.
Yeah, this is my twin brother, Richard. Yeah. From the time he's a 3-year-old, he's got a confliction with Dad. That's going to be defined. It's going to define his life. It's going to mess up his life. And it's going to follow him through his life to the very end.
And, you know, actually, it was Dad. It was at 888, man. And Dad told him, he goes, you know what? If you're not going to do this, then you're out of here. And he sent Richard out of that house a packing. And then Richard went, and he couldn't get in the first time. He was drinking too much diet soda. And boy, they came back, and then he did that. But my dad made him go in.
You know, I have a rare copy of a cassette of a song that he released himself. Him singing.
Great.
He did one song of Barry's and one song of Billy's. How many copies do you think are around anymore?
I don't know, but I got to. Oh, sorry. Well, I was just going to say, you're talking about Vagabond, right? I don't know if I heard Barry's, but man,
I got to tell you something. My Car Don't Lock. I think he did that song.
Well, all I heard was Vagabond, and I'm going to tell you, man, he nailed that song.
Absolutely.
Right. So crazy stuff,
there's
man.
No reason that the 7th of 7 children couldn't have been in this band from the beginning. But the decision that he wasn't going to be put in anything was made long before we even had brains that could question it. Okay.
Yeah.
This started early in life with Richard and our dad. And our dad and he were going to go at it all through this as almost a sidebar to the whole thing. And we were just intimidated so much through all of it just to keep our mouths shut. Right. We were into the music anyway, so that was our escape. You know, I could go into that. That's where Dad wasn't. You know, so we got into the music.
But Richard, didn't you bring him out as a road manager for a couple of tours?
Well, sure.
The whole beginning of the Cowsills. You know, AJ and everybody out there, man, you know, everybody was in the Cowsills. You know what I'm saying? Because it doesn't matter if you were Richard or me or Susan or Bob or Billy or any of them. Everybody had a role, and Bob's role was as important as Richard's role was important. Right. We never got a sense of not being in or not being out, you know. Mm-hmm. It was segues into singing, or, you know, it just, that happened. But, I never, and me and Richard, we had a ball doing what we were doing. We were like guards. We were on each side of the stage. Every single show at every club on the East Coast, we were ready for a brawl, and we were waiting for one. We loved them. Anyway, like a Venus de Malo.
Paul and Rich were going to be the roadies with the family, within the family, that supported the band within the family.
Right.
Because the band within the family, look, Richard, I was 7 years old, got on the guitar, I never put it back down. Okay, Richard didn't.
Right.
What 7-year-old was he, right? Well, he was that 7-year-old. Right. I got into high school, I'm more proficient at the guitar. Now I'm in the folk music club, I'm doing hootenannies because I found that life. He found surfing and another life in Newport, Rhode Island. Because by that time, the lockhead, the jam, the cog that our father had created in his life was well in place, and it was prominent, and it was running the show. And even we didn't know it at the time, but it was running everything. And this guy was never going to get in the band.
Right.
And you can question, how does a man sit in the audience in the Ed Sullivan Theater watching his family on the Ed Sullivan Show and keeps one son out of this band and out of this experience? How does he... Why? How do you live with that? But we're not going to ask him.
Well,
No
I'll
way.
tell you, me and Richard were pretty close at the end, and I always got the feeling that there was something there that really still bothered him till the end of his life. Even though he said, "Oh yeah, I was here, I was doing that, I was defending the country, I was that." I really think that it still bothered him till the very end. And that's why I think he wanted to put out that music himself to show everybody that, hey. And another thing, at that 2000 Tory in Newport, Rhode Island, what a great show. Billy was there, all 7 people on stage. What a wonderful show that was,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Richard was there. Richard was there playing percussion and being a part of the band on stage. Because, when you get older and you move on in life, things that had a grip on you are loosened eventually, and you start understanding what the hell was going on. And then you look at your brother Richard and say, yeah, get the hell on stage with us.
Yeah.
We're coming to town,
Yeah.
because the drama's gone or something. But the drama it created was everlasting. You're right, Richard to the end. And who wouldn't want to have been a part of it? Why would you want to go through life saying, no, I'm the one out of the 7
Right.
kids that didn't get in?
Right.
Right. And
Well, why?
yeah. And AJ, another thing, is when Dad had Rich go into the service, we still were crawling up it, it wasn't a famous band at that moment. I mean,
Right.
there was Telltale Signs for sure, but Rain in the Park wasn't a hit, and that was all happening. And, so I'm sure at that time, knowing Rich like I know him, he was just thinking, shit, this ain't never going to happen,
Right. Yeah.
And he left it probably, but over the years, the success it had, and how many times did he have to answer, hey, why aren't you in the band,
Right.
and
Yeah,
all of that. So,
knowing Dad, he probably said to Rich, hey, this is never going to happen. Look, I'm
Right.
telling you, he had it in for the kid when he was born. I don't know how to explain this to people. This relationship is what defined the whole thing. The band was over here always. It wasn't from out of the band. They had their own war going on or something. I don't know what it was.
Yeah, we did, man. They did.
Yeah, it was always going on.
I don't know if you guys ever heard the story, but Richard and Susan Montella Cowsill, the other Susan Cowsill, they came to my wedding. They were the only people at my wedding because you were all in the West Coast and Susan was in New Orleans and Barry was in New Orleans. So Richard was there, and all of a sudden I'm looking over at my wife, Harrison's mother, Tina, throwing the bouquet of flowers over her shoulder, and she throws it, and there's about 10, 15 women out there, and who's there? Richard. And Richard turns around, and he caught the bouquet. And I will never forget the look in his eyes as he looks in his hand with Tina's bouquet in his hand. It was so funny. I gave him crap about that.
Only Rich would find himself in the middle of 15, unmarried women.
He was talking to a girl. He was talking to a girl.
Right. And he turns and his bouquet's flying his way. I love it.
All right, so listen, we were talking about when you first broke out, and you had, I wanted to bring Biggie Corn in. He was a road manager for you guys, and he owns Yesterday's right now. How did you know Biggie, and how great a guy is he, and how great is the food at Yesterday's?
Well, Biggie, we met. We lived on Indian Avenue in Middletown, and somehow he had gotten connected with Ira and some guys we got to know up in New York. And he took to us as a family. Our mom took to Biggie and looked at him as somebody that could be with the guys that seemed to be able to protect them a little, because we were starting to do concerts up and down the East Coast now. And Biggie came on board. I know he loaned money to Dad. I know that he played football with us in the yard in Indian Avenue for hours. He knew just how to do that. He was a football player in college probably. But he was a very teenage guy kind of guy. And
he was. I remember he rolled up in a Valiant that Richard destroyed, but anyway, that's another story. And he rolled up, and we all kind of went over, and it was a younger guy, to us, but older than us, and it was like, wow. And he had a football in his car. It was in his car, and I'm looking in there, and I'm seeing sweats and Rutgers, and all this stuff. And I'm thinking, who is this cat? And then he moved in, man. And I got to tell you, He moved in, and
Yeah.
he took a lot of the terror that we were all experiencing in that household on Indian Avenue, and he just gave us if we wanted to go to that hole, we could get in there, and I mean, it felt pretty safe in there. Felt pretty safe around Biggie,
Hey, in 1967, the age range in your group were like 8 years old to 19. You were young people then. I can understand that.
Yeah, Mom had her hands full, definitely.
Hey,
Totally.
so you guys inspired the 70s show, The Partridge Family. Can we
deny
hear a quick story? We deny it. Can we hear a quick story about
I've always wanted to say that. I was a guest on Danny Bonaducci's radio show. He had a radio show in Chicago for a long time, and I phoned in and was a guest, and he introduced me. He goes, right, and we stole everything this family stood for to our benefit and used it all, and gave him credit. Bob Cowsill. So Danny was very upfront, and probably the one Partridge kid, I think Paul anyway, who was upfront about, it was their story. Of course it's based on them. Where later in time, it became annoying to like David and not Shirley, but how many times do you want to be asked, is it true your famous shows, because somebody else famous before you and you wouldn't have had your show if it weren't for them? Is that true? Like no one wants to, they got tired of it.
You're still friends.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to tell you, and this can only be labeled as hearsay because it never was said to me, but somebody told me that in one of the late interviews with David, they asked him the Cowsill question, and he said, "Hey, I am not answering that, and I don't want any more Cowsill questions."
He did. What Paul says is true. He let it be known before interviews toward the end, like, I don't want to be asked about the Cowsills. Okay, I'm so tired of it.
Yeah.
Bob, you're still friends with Shirley Jones, though, aren't you?
We all are friends with Shirley Jones. I mean, it's not like we're going to go to dinner or anything.
Right.
But like she called us when Barry passed, so that kind of friend,
Right.
And we got to know her later because of the documentary we did with Louise Palanker, and we got to interview Shirley Jones for that documentary. And that's where you got the honest truth of, we asked her, hey, did you ever hear of us? No. And I said, well, that's okay. We never heard of you either. Because she came from Broadway.
Absolutely.
And, we're in the pop world, and these worlds are going to cross now. And it's very unique in that when that happened, people don't know how unique that was.
Right.
Early to say yes. And so she said they brought our pictures to the meetings. Here's who the Cowsills are. Here's who you're doing. They played some of our music. Here's what they sound like, teaching everyone why they're there. And we thought that was pretty cool because Shirley Jones, I believe anything she says, I mean, David took it hard. David would have been a star, I think, in his own right. He had that quality. But unfortunately, it was passed through the teen idol tunnel. And, some guys can handle that and some guys can't. But they did come to the house. They visited us, and they crossed us off as not actors. But look, me and Paul are like 19 and 18, 17 and 19 at the time, or maybe 18 and 20. And we're not what they're looking for, believe me. Well, you saw what they were looking for. You see the show. So they took our record producer, who at the time was Wes Farrell with Indian Lake. They took Tony Romeo, who wrote Indian Lake. He's going to write I Think I Love You. So they took the production team around us, took our story, took the bus, and just replaced us and had a hit show. That's an honor. We are honored by that.
Right.
I saw her sitting in the rain, raindrops falling on her. She didn't seem to care. She sat there and smiled at me. Then I knew she could make me happy. She could make me very happy. Flowers in her hair, flowers everywhere. I love the flower girl. Oh, I don't know just why. She simply caught my eye. I love the flower girl. She seemed so sweet and kind. She crept into my mind.
One of the things about you were talking about Louise Palanker's great documentary on you people. It's a great show. But one thing I wanted to mention and get your reaction to. Once Louise in the documentary said that Bill had an argument with your dad and left the band. And once Harrison and I, in 2000, we came down and we were on Bannister's Wharf in Barry and Billy's room, hotel room, with Richard. And also I walked over to Billy with my chillum, and I handed him my pipe, and he looks at me and he takes it and he goes, Dad threw me out of the band he caught me smoking weed with Waddy Wachtel. Was that the real story? Because Billy told that to me, and I just was laughing about that with Harrison. And all these years later, I still think that's a funny story.
Well, with Bill, in the way that Richard and Dad clashed from the day he was born, okay, so they're going to spend their life at each other's throats. The thing with Bill and Dad was it was leading up to it. This was going to explode eventually, but it was different than with Richard. But yeah, look, the pot thing, that goes back to Artie Kornfeld, so that's old stuff. What he did was he called us in one Sunday morning. We're all going to the airport, and we're going on tour. And we are in the middle of mixing our live album, and Hair has been a #1 hit, and we've got it going on. Our dad goes through Bill's car, and he finds some shake and some remnants of pot. And he collects it, right, Paul? He collects it all up, brings it into the living room in Santa Monica at the house there, puts it on the table in the middle of the living room, calls us all in. Bill's not there though. Calls us all in. He goes, you know what? Your brother's gone. Your brother's not going, or whatever he said. He's done. This is what happens when you disobey the rules, because he applied the military code of ethics to the very end. Even when it was failing him miserably, he wouldn't give up. Right, Paul? He wouldn't.
Yeah, buddy.
Oh, Jesus God.
Oh, yeah.
So this is what happens if you disobey. Okay. So he removes Bill from the band, and we leave him in LA that day. But look, they've been at it for a long time, Guy.
Right.
Okay. This is a buildup. This is just it. And they had a big fight in Las Vegas. They had a letter. They sent in a letter to Bill. He's going to fire him, blah, blah, blah. So, but that Sunday morning, we all went to LAX without him. And that was going to lead to almost an exile of him. And he's going to end up in Canada. We're going to lose track of him. And so we get on the plane. We get to wherever we were going, and me and Paul got to work. Now, there's so many members of the Cowsills, the audience, they don't know what's going on. They don't know Bill's not there. So I'm singing Bill's parts, Paul's doing mine, and we're flipping this thing up and doing a tour because we did have that ability. I mean, honestly, any one of us could not show up, and the show would be fine.
Right.
Even though he was the main singer, and any true fan would know, where's Bill? Where's Bill? Where's Bill? And so it was about pot, yes. And Waddy, Dad always thought Waddy was a bad influence, but this goes back to the mid-'60s when Waddy's got his band, the Orphans. Yeah. He's playing Dorians. We're the Cowsills brothers. We're up at the MK. We go way back with Waddy to when we were kids. See?
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Listen, yeah. I have a great idea. Next time you speak to Waddy, you just say, listen, we want to go back in the studio, you and AJ on slide guitar, and we'll be the band. We'll do all the vocals, and we'll even do a song from the musical Hair. We'll do, this is the dawning of the age of Wachtelligence.
No, that's funny, though. No, but yeah, Waddy's been in and out of our life through our whole life. I mean, his band was the Rascals, and we were the Beatles when we were kids.
You brought up Artie Kornfeld before, and Artie, he was also involved in Woodstock, in organizing Woodstock. How come the Cowsills didn't play Woodstock?
Geez, and then who do you invite after us? The Archies? We weren't Woodstock material back then. We know that.
And we were actually, AJ, we were on tour in the Midwest. We heard all about it, but we were working.
Yeah, we couldn't have done it anyway. But by that time, Artie and the Cowsills had parted company. See, Artie got a settlement from MGM when our dad caught Artie telling me and Bill about pot because we wrote songs together. And Bill told Dad that Artie mentioned pot to us, and Dad fired Artie after we finally had a $1 million seller. We couldn't believe it. But anyway, that's another show. But it goes back that far. Now, then Artie's gone. Now, the next time I hear from Artie, I'm just going to go visit Artie, and he's not doing well. I mean, you know, he'll tell you he was into drugs and all. He was just having a bad time. And he's in this little office in New York City. He goes, Bobby, come in. And he's got posters of this concert he's working on. Now, it's going to be Woodstock. But this is the messed up Artie I'm with, and I'm just checking in on him. And I'm going, yeah, Artie, you got a festival going good. That's good for you. Because by the time you leave, you go, yeah, I hope that must be therapeutic for him to work on a festival. He doesn't look like he's doing well. And it was Woodstock.
Woodstock.
You know, okay. Well, let's get back to some of your history. You released 5 albums from '67 to '70. Your second album was "We Can Fly." Then you did "Indian Lake," and then after the summer tour in '68, you moved from Newport to Santa Monica, California, and you brought Waddy out with you. Tell me about the move. How did that change everything?
Well, the move was actually because MGM and the whole music business that was centered in New York City in '69 was moving to the West Coast. And all of the MGM acts, including us, were being brought along, including our manager, Lenny Stogel, and the whole operation was being moved to the West Coast. And from Newport, we had lived in New York City for almost 2 years, right, Paul? A year and a half.
Yes.
Right, on 8th Avenue. We had that city down pat as young guys, and we had the Rain in the Park. Another thing was a hit there, and we're just doing fine in New York City. Right. But what we thought never mattered. So, well, that's nice. You're going to to California, and out we came. And that's the reason we came. Now, Waddy, Dad and David Ray, who owned Orions at the time where we performed and Waddy performed, and had always told Waddy that if they ever had money someday, they're going to get his band out, because this guy was one talented guy. Right. And so Dad and David Ray found Waddy playing at a club up in New Hampshire, I think, and they went up and visited him. And we were moving to the West Coast, and Dad said, we're going to move you guys out to the West Coast, and they did. We moved Waddy and his band Twice Nicely into Benedict Canyon. We set him up in a house, got him studio time. We were that group that helped another group for a long time. And
Munz was in Twice Nicely, right?
Who's that?
Oh, yeah. Muntz was in Twice Nicely for sure. And AJ, so
Muntz
here we are.
The Orphans. Muntz was way back with Waddy.
Yeah, bass player. And I got a funny Muntz story, but I just got to tell you, though, so we're there in Santa Monica, and, you know, we don't know too much information from Mom and Dad. We're just not getting anything ever. And so it was nighttime. I remember it so well. And all of a sudden, this big green, God, it looked like a bread truck, but it could have been a panel truck, you know, drives into the driveway. And, you know, we got an old man that's been way uptight about hair, he's way uptight about everything. And so all of a sudden, this band steps out. It's Judy Pulver, it's Muntz, and it's Waddy, and it's Greg, the drummer. And they got hair down in their asses and their dirt. They just came out of Colorado, you know, from playing in the mountains, and they looked like it. And it was like, wow, check this band out. It was awesome.
She asked him why I'm a hairy guy. I'm hairy noon and nighty night. My hair is a fright. I'm hairy high and low, but don't ask me why, 'cause he don't know. It's not for lack of bread, like the Grateful Dead, darling. Give me a head with hair, long, beautiful hair, shining, gleaming, streaming, flaxen, waxing. Give me down to there, shoulder length longer. Here, baby, there, mama, everywhere, daddy. home for the fleas in my hair. A home for the fleas, a hive for the buzzing bees, a nest for birds. There ain't no words for the beauty, the splendor, the wonder of my hair. Grow it, show it, long as I can grow it, my hair.
Is it fact or fiction that you got a copy of the Hair soundtrack album from Carl Reiner?
Where did you hear that? That's ridiculous.
I mean,
read that somewhere.
You've got names correct, you know. I mean, it was Carl Reiner who reached out to us. And we were doing The Wonderful World of Pizzazz, which was going to be a TV show put on by Harper's Bazaar magazine. And it was talking about the, you know, just the clothes of the day and the hair and the styles. And
Right.
and we were that clean cut band. So somewhere along the road, Carl Reiner was thinking, man, we got to have the Cowsills, or somebody thought, we'll have the Cowsills and we'll have them put on wigs, you know, and they'll be the hippies of the show. And we did Hair as a show for this TV, as a song for this TV show. But I'll tell you one thing, AJ, is when we're in a concert and we do Hair and we say the Grateful Dead, dude, they always cheer. You know, there's always a bunch of people that are going to cheer when we mention the Grateful Dead.
Well, you know, the fun fact about that song, it was recorded in TTG Studios in Hollywood, which at the time had only 16 track recorder around, and Jimi Hendrix and Zappa also recorded there. That's a little known fact. And
the engineer from Hair left our session into his Jimi Hendrix session.
How wild is that, huh? You know, and I remember, you know, John, he was 12 years old at the time, and I read that he had trouble with the changing tempo in "Oh Say Can You See" part.
And remember, we're coming out of a career up to this point. When we stepped into the studio for Rain the Park and other things, they took the gear out of our hands.
Right.
So we're not going to play on our own records for all these albums. We're going to do it a different way. Now, with Hair, all of a sudden, we got the guitars back on, and John's the drummer and Barry's the bass player, and we're all going to go in and do this song in 2 days. And we hadn't recorded ourselves as musicians in 3 years.
Right.
4 years. So in terms of 100 takes, yeah, it took many, many, many takes. And in terms of blaming John, absolutely. He was the troublemaker.
Well, it's just so hard to believe that he is one of the greatest drummers on this planet today.
Yeah, well, yeah, that he is today. But, you know, at this time, he's, I think, 10.
12 years old, yeah.
Oh, he's 12? Okay,
Yeah.
12. No, and I'm kidding about blaming him. You know, we were all rookies. I mean, I'm playing a freaking harpsichord on Hair. I never even saw a harpsichord. It just happened to be sitting in the studio.
And John, and I got to tell you, John took a lot of heat from Bill.
For what?
Just, you know, tempos and all the things that people get kooky with drummers about. Poor John, he was getting hit over the head all the time.
It's very hard to keep a tempo steady for 3 minutes and 28 seconds. It's difficult. That's why drummers, if you hear of great drummers, what do you also hear? Oh, they're on everything.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason.
All right, you know, from 68 to 72, you cats played 200 gigs, over 200 gigs a year. I mean, how rough was that?
Well, that wasn't rough.
That was awesome.
Life. That was life.
You even had a comic book published by Harvey Comics in 1968. How much copies going on for eBay now?
That's not really us, AJ. Those are just drawings. That's all they are. You know, listen, I've held that comic book up a number of times as an example of, like, we even got here.
Yeah. Actually, we've even seen it come along in like a meet and greet.
It's always startling. But, you know, no one wanted to deal with our father. And the reason I bring him up is even with the comic book, what do we get? One issue. Love American Style. What do we get? 1 year.
And he never even asked for the rights. He never sold the rights to Partridge Family.
Yeah, the guy was a knucklehead. I don't mean to bring him up again, but God darn it, we should have had a second comic book, I tell you.
Hey, you know, let's talk a little bit about Barry. You know, he was such a free spirit. He loved to yank my chain, and I love to yank his chain too. What do you remember best about Barry?
Man, just loving him, actually. You know, he was a kooky little kid, but he was great. You know, he had a motorcycle accident, you know, in his late teens, I think. And, you know, he was never quite the same after that, but he was a real character. Man, this guy, he could dance like Chuck Berry and do the whole thing from stage left to stage right, just like Chuck Berry did it. And he could do James Brown. Bob sang James Brown, but Berry, he could move like James Brown. That kid had
Fluid.
it.
Fluid, absolutely fluid.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about, since I have both of you on, let's talk a little bit about your solo careers. You know, after, you know, in the late 70s, you guys did Cocaine Drain, and that was never completed, and the tapes were lost and found and finally released in 2008. What's the story on that?
Well, Cocaine Drain, that's an album we made with Chuck Block in 70?
4?
I don't know, in the mid 70s. And it was completed, by the way. It just was never released because we weren't going to get the record deal we needed. And it just wasn't in the cards for that to happen. So it was a great album. We didn't do a lot of recording, but what we did, we feel represents where we were supposed to be at the time we did them, because we didn't do another one till Global, which is going to be 90s. And that would have been what we sounded like in the 90s had we kept releasing album after album after album up until the one coming Rhythm of the World. This is where we're supposed to be today. It's just the difference between our band is we did most of it quietly out of scene without a record deal. We worked on our craft. We did perform solo. We performed all through the years with cover bands, our own bands, each other's bands. We never stopped being musicians and singing, even though there wasn't a record deal or a release in the works.
Right. You can count every decade. About every decade, we would get going all again. Something would happen, though, AJ. It was funny. You know, a little something. Hey, guys want to be on Good Morning America? What? You know, it came out of the sky like that. And then you go, oh, wow. And then something else happens, and you're thinking, hey, wow, okay, let's get this jamboree up and going. And God would do it for 10 years, and then it wouldn't happen. And we go, okay, well, maybe it's not meant to be. Then a little rest, and then another 10 years. It's crazy.
But he's right, Paul. What Paul says too. Something always happened. This career has pursued us relentlessly.
Yes.
Even when we've left it and said, "Okay, we're good with leaving it. Fine."
Yeah.
Right, Paul.
Yes.
You know, Paul, one thing I will always remember, speaking about record deals and record companies, is after Barry died, I was catching up with you in a dressing room, you, Bob, and Susan, and we were all sitting down, and then all of a sudden you stood up and you said, it was just us four in the room, and you said, AJ, on behalf of the family, I just want to thank you for standing up and, telling us your opinion on, Barry's records and his legacy and stuff like that. And, I was like misty in tears, and I was saying, he'd do the same for me. But I just want you, Paul, to know that when I look at you, that's something that I always think of in the back of my mind, how gracious and how nice you were to me that day.
Well, AJ, Barry freaking loved you, dude. I mean,
the thing with Barry is he wanted to be a rocker. He like Keith Richards type of rocker. He wanted a hard edge to things, and he was in the wrong band to achieve that. And that's okay, because if you're in the band you're in and you're talented, you give what that band needs, and that's what he gave us for sure. But and with Dad and Barry, it was more of a mental kind of. Dad was into Barry's brain, man, and gave him a lot of trouble that way. It was a little less physical with Barry. But Barry was all of the heart and all of the love and peace and understanding kind of stuff, That's how he did it. But he wanted, I think, less vocals and more hard guitar.
Yes, for sure. And it's funny because Barry, his mind was going 1,000,000 miles an hour all the time, and although he wanted to beat Keith Richards, even his Route 66 album is still Barry. It's a harder sound for Barry, but it's still right in that groove. I mean, he sat in a good space with his music, in my opinion.
It's funny you say that because that was the only song that he would sing when he played with Blind Lemon Pledge and the Seeing Eye Dogs. That's the only song he would sing. He'd get up there and he'd kick ass and the roof would come down.
Nice.
But listen, let's talk. I just want one or two mentions. I want everybody to know that just how cool you two are. Your solo stuff, Bob. For years, you've done like worked with emergency rooms, training them how to do accounting. And you're like you're training first liners. That's just so cool. And Paul, you live on a farm, but you were in construction. You were Helen Reddy's sound person for years.
I was a road manager too for
her road
3 years.
manager.
Yeah.
You guys have really like outside Cowsill lives that you do, and I'm proud of both of you, and it's just so cool.
Yeah, me and Bob have actually done that our whole lives. It's funny because, it's never a question in our mind. We don't go, I wonder if we should get a job right now. There's not, we just do it. Yeah. And that's how me and Bob have gone along the way. And I will tell you, it is kind of fun double dipping. If you have the energy and the wherewithal to do 2 jobs at the same time or 3, man, right. It's great. It's great fun.
Well, it's the personality to not give up the stable job. I mean, when you said my solo work, I thought you were going to start telling me about some non-existent solo band I had. But then you straightened me out when you went to the emergency department. Yeah, that's still my day job. I still code and do things for an emergency department in St. Gabriel. But we're still waiting for the Happy Together tour to come back.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Now, what's the word with it? Tell us. You've been doing that for a couple of years in the summer. What's the story with the? That's with the Turtles and other bands. It's a great show. Tell me when that's coming back.
Well, they're saying the end of July, but we just don't know. We actually talked to them last week, and Ron said we're moving things, we're working on it. But he goes, we'll wait and see. We're just waiting and seeing.
I always wanted to ask you, Barry, getting back to Barry, he didn't want to do a song for me. I came out with an album, Boston Does the Beatles, and he played all the instruments and he sang everything on Everybody's Got Something to Hide except for Me and My Monkey. And, this guy was just an amazing talent. But, the impression I always got was that all of you people always thought that Billy was the most talented. And, his group, his band, he was in the country band, the Blue Angels?
Go ahead, Paul.
Blue Shadows.
Blue Shadows, right.
Yeah.
And Blue Northern, too.
And the Blue Northern, yeah.
But he was the best singer. There was no debate. I mean, look, we all sing, and on Rhythm of the World, Paul and I are the lead singers, and Susan, we all sing lead. But with Bill around, if you lined us all up and said who's the lead singer of the Cowsills, 6 would point to the 7th. Okay, it would just happen. It was just kind of that way. And if we thought one of us should do one, that was really just to mix it up and not have it be Bill all the time.
Hey, let's talk about Rhythm of the World, your new release. Please tell me, I think you do a bunch of your songs, your hits, a cappella, and please tell me about that. And you have original songs, and when's it going to be released?
Well, I'll tell you what. So it's a song of 11. It's an album of 11 songs, all written by Bob, Susan, and myself. And it's just the most fun thing we've ever done. But actually, we started it out on tour. I mean, we had talked about it. Susan had talked about it a long time about making a final album, but that was back when we had Bill and Barry still around. And, we thought, well, maybe it's really time because you never know. And so about 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, or maybe 2. I forget what year we did it, but we went out on tour. We wrote about 11 songs.
Right.
I mean, it was incredible. The three of us would sit down, and Bob's sitting there with his guitar, and me and Susan are hashing over lyrics and doing this.
Cool.
We're coming up with stuff, and Bob's, he's formulating over there. I mean, we were like a team. It was like the unspoken team because everybody gravitated to what they were going to do on these songs and stuff,
Well,
and
you're on tour. When you're on tour, I want everybody to know is that both of your sons are in the band, Ryan and Brendan. Brendan too are. And how cool is that? Another generation of Cowsills on tour with you.
Yeah, that's really a lot of fun having the kids, man. It's it makes look at and so we never have issues in our world with this band. There's never an issue. Nobody, because the kids are there and they're gonna do what we say. No, not really. but there's guidance, and it's just it's real family, man. We haven't gotten away from the family.
Yeah, even Susan's husband's our drummer, Russ. So it's like John's with the Beach Boys. We lost the brothers, so we got the sons and the brother-in-law working for us now. But in terms of when, the rhythm of the world, we're done with the music. We were fortunate enough to record it just before the pandemic hit, and then we got to mix it with Frank Filippetti, and me and Paul remotely got to mix this thing. It took about 8 months because of that, but we had time. We were fortunate that this is something we could accomplish during the COVID shutdown. So it's mixed and read. Music is done. Now we're going to do artwork. What's it going to look like? We got Pledge Music obligations to fulfill. So I'm thinking autumn, honestly, autumn.
For
we
sure.
got a lot to do. We got a lot to do.
People can just look up the info on cowsills.com, right?
Cowsill.com, no S, cowsill.com. There's Facebook, the Cowsills, of course. And believe me, we will get the word to you. But keep tabs on us for sure.
Yeah.
But,
AJ, the interesting thing about this whole thing, how lucky we were, because we got this, the music, the mechanics of the recording, it was all done with pretty good rough mixes. And that was like a week before they shut the world down.
Right.
So we had that though. We God, I can't imagine if it had happened a month earlier, we would have nothing now. Now we have a mastered album ready to go.
Yeah, look for the Cowsills podcast too. Us podcasters have to stick together.
Hey AJ, I got to tell you something that's really cool that's happening. So when you're staying up late, or maybe on a Sunday around 5 o'clock, you'll go onto those channels that sell love songs from the '60s, and they got famous people there. It's Lifetime, the Time Life. We're doing it.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, we're doing a Time Life show. I'm so excited. We're going to have to
tell me about it.
Well, we don't know much about it. We just know Alan, and he's the guy that does the Flower Power cruise. And they were talking, I guess, amongst themselves, and they said, "Man, wouldn't the Cowsills be great doing one of these?" They've had B.J. Thomas and Neil Sedaka,
Cool.
Yeah. So
here's a taste of it, AJ. And what has Time Life done? They have collected all of these fantastic songs for you. They've done the work. They went online, they collected them, they've sequenced them, they've packaged them. All you have to do is pick that phone number up and dial that number and call in and get this package. How did I do? Did I sell any, do you think? I don't know.
You did. Hey, Bob, and also, doesn't it bring you right back to junior high?
It does.
Yeah.
I can't wait to do it.
So, yeah. Anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, I'm glad you did. And I wanted to throw in this final question, the way I end all of my Wachtelligence podcasts. What was the first concert you two guys attended?
Well, for me, it had to be, if we're talking about a concert sitting in an audience with a stage and everything, it was, I don't know what year, 65 maybe, at the Newport Folk Festival when Bob Dylan went electric.
By the way, we were there, and I'm older than Paul, so I'm remembering more of the detail of it. But but I remember the booing. Okay, but in my head, I didn't know what they were booing. I read about it later that he was being untrue to his true folk self, and I'm going, really? Because I mean, Paul at 65, I'm 15. Paul's 13. We don't care about the booing. What?
Yeah.
What's going on in the crowd? You know, it's like, it was crazy. But then we realized later in life we were in a famous audience.
Yeah, we were. And AJ, it was funny because, you know, they had fences around this place. You know, they actually put it where me and Bob played Little League.
Right.
And so they had these like ocean fences that you see in sand dunes and stuff. Man, I just went up, I put my foot on that fence, and me and Bob just walked in.
Hey,
a lot of the locals, we knew how to get into the folk festival.
We
But
did.
I got to answer mine because I have a little different one. My first concert was, in terms of a real concert that impressed me, holy cow, because we're in Newport, Rhode Island. You had to drive, was Paul Revere and the Raiders at the Providence Civic Auditorium, I think, or whatever year that would have been. And they were in their Raider outfits, and it was when Kix was a hit, so 65 maybe. And
wow.
We were just blown away. I don't know how I got there, whether our dad or mom took us. I don't know who I'm with, but I remember those outfits and the show and the stage specifically, and them singing Kix. I'm going, I mean, I was so impressed with it. Yeah.
I remember on Lansdowne Street, 20 years ago, Susan, your sister, introduced me to Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders because you were on tour with them and you played a gig at Lansdowne Street. And I was in the audience with Amy Mann from Till Tuesday, and we watched your show. Great show.
Oh, cool. Yeah, one of the things about Happy Together tours, we're meeting people that, to us when we were kids, we were famous too, but when you're a kid, you know, you're not, everyone else is untouchable. And no one's coming near you. And then later in life, we're meeting them on these tours, and we're all older. And it's really cool to get to know Mark Lindsay, when at one point he was like a god to us, you know?
Yeah.
Listen, I have a story for you guys briefly. I just thought of this. I remember a long time ago, decades ago, you played at a hotel outside of Newport, maybe in Middleton, in Rhode Island. And I went down with Barry. Barry was playing bass, and Barry got very lit up, as I did, and I was with my friend Norman, and I think everybody in the band thought that I was the bad influence on Barry that night. I'm here to confess to you, it was Tommy Galvin. Tommy, who was Barry's friend, he dosed all of us. Do you remember that gig? And I just want to let you know and set it straight that I had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's interesting that, you know, it wasn't you, it wasn't Norman. All of a sudden we have this name.
Do you remember Tommy Galvin? He was the bartender.
Yeah, right. And Tommy, I talked to Tommy. He blamed it on Fred Smith, you know, so we
All right. I just wanted to clear that up 30 years later.
Consider it cleared.
Yeah. Hey, guys, thanks so much for spending time on Wachtelligence with me.
Thank you for having us, AJ.
Seeing you and hearing you again. And I can't wait till you come to town with the Happy Together tour so me and Harrison can come down and see and hear you play again.
Well, listen, if you're still casting pods in the autumn, we'll grab our sister out of the woods and we'll come on again and talk about Rhythm of the World.
Hey, and this time when you're on tour, we'll pay no guest list because after the pandemic, you have to show your support to the musicians and everybody. There are no guest lists anymore.
Well, what we'll do is we'll still have one, and your name will still be on it, and you can make that decision at the gate.
Yeah.
You're giving me too much, opinion. You're giving me too much work to do.
Yeah.
Give you an inch, you take a mile.
Yeah.
Hey, isn't that the Wachtel motto?
Yeah. All right, AJ.
Thank you so much, guys.
Love you,
thanks,
buddy.
guys. Thank you, David. No one knows David or sees David, but there is a David. Okay, unlike a Tom. Okay.
Right. Okay, later out.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Wachtelligence. You can connect with me on Facebook at Wachtelligence. Thanks to my producers, my son Harrison and David Schwartz, and Harvey Brooks for my theme song. Don't forget to subscribe.
I don't care what you think of me. Don't need no jailer to set me free. Don't want strangers filling up my cup. Don't need no advisor to show me down from up.